Square Enix, they're responsible for a lot of my favorite games, and I'm sure same goes for you guys. But god damn it, they are so confusing it. And these latest news stories, and somewhat latest, sort of exemplify the confusion. So, as usual, let's get right to it. So I originally saw this story from VGC. I use them a lot to cite stories. They're pretty good. But they're originally going to source Yahoo Japan for the Square Enix president Yosuke Matsuda interview. And I have that up here as well, translated. But more importantly, I just want to get to the gist of this. I'm not going to go through every little detail. So here we go. VGC's headline: Square Enix president reiterates desire to make, quote, play to earn blockchain games. Matsuda was previously criticized for publicly committing to polarizing tech trends. Those tech trends being NFTs. You'll see the news stories from back in January where he was talking about incorporating NFTs and blockchain into, I guess, games? I don't know how that would work. I know Ubisoft has been attempting to do something similar to this, and as most of you know by now, NFTs are incredibly unpopular among gamers for good reason. It's nebulous technology. It's not necessarily as valuable as people think. If you want to know more about it, this isn't the channel for you, unfortunately, because I'm not so sure what it is either. Every time anyone says NFTs, I think of scams. I think of people, which I guess is not a scam since they auctioned off his work and as NFTs. And I think of blockchain, although even then I don't understand blockchain that well. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on it. I know it has a lot to do with connecting computers. That has a lot to do with keeping a ledger for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies and stuff like that. And it's centered around a lot of cybersecurity topics in tech. But nonetheless, I'm not going to talk about something I don't know much about. However, I do know a lot about games, and I know a lot about Square Enix's games. And at the same time, I don't know a lot about what they're thinking when they talk about these plans they have. I'll go into more detail about it, but let's breeze through the story real quick. So, the story says, in a new interview with Yahoo Japan, the exec said he believed that focusing only on traditional games would be, quote, not enough for the company going forward, and described his vision for titles in which users would create content and be rewarded for their work. Matsuda previously said Square Enix could create its own cryptocurrency. Jeez. Quote, in the future, we would like to try our hands at providing autonomous game content. Quote, I don't know what he means by that, but I guess it's going back to players creating content, essentially. Users. Yeah, well, they wouldn't be playing if they're making content. They would be creators, and they would be users if they're using a platform owned by Square Enix. Makes sense. So it continues, until now, in most games, we provided the content as a finished product, and the players played that content. However, there are a certain number of players in the world who would want to contribute to making games more interesting by creating new settings and ways of playing. And here I'm kind of confused, because the way he describes this, I immediately think of the modding community. I mean, I'm sure most of you have seen clips of like Final Fantasy VII Remake modded to death, like Tifa wearing outlandish outfits and other degenerate content, of course. But that's what I think of. I don't think of turning players or into users into potential workers slash contractors and doing basically Square Enix developer type of jobs, like the type of tasks they're up to do, like creating assets, or he says settings. Those are basically environments, levels, stuff like that. That's all I think about when I think about creating new settings in the context of making games or contributing to games. I don't know what else he means by that. But to go to the original story, here I highlighted from Yahoo Japan. I was originally in Japanese, so I translated it through a Google Translate extension. It's as decent. I mean, I don't know Japanese, so I'm just assuming it's good enough since it sounds like, from what I'm reading, it sounds like it makes sense. Nonetheless, Apologies for bad translation. Not me doing it, me doing it through technology. Nonetheless, I highlighted the part that I thought was kind of interesting that gives us perspective into kind of CEO Yosuke Matsuda is. And let me just read off what I have highlighted. Being involved in the production of a game from the position of president is like waiting for food while the development team is cooking hard. It doesn't work if you intervene too much because you're worried. Don't open or peek at the pot lid over and over again just because you're curious. Therefore, I think it is important to patiently wait for what the developer, who is a cook, will make. And from that, I get the perspective that he's a very hands-off type of leader. He knows that his artists, his developers, programmers and such, are working on making in this metaphor he uses, a meal that he expects to be really good. I can understand that because they do make good games over there at Square Enix. Excuse me. So that in this case, this reminds me of a lot of what Yoshi P used to say back when he was working on A Realm Reborn originally, that he had to tell the executives what his plans were and how he would accomplishing it. Over there, Yoshi P himself was very like I think one of the quotes he used in the no clip documentaries was micromanagement. It's like micromanage, and he was basically the opposite of what Matsuda is describing here. Very, very specific on what kind of specific goals that each team member would be accomplishing, which tasks. Like whenever you open a drop down of any sort of thing, and then over there in the drop down, it's like more things to drop down, and then you keep clicking, clicking. It's like tab on tab on tab, different sorts of items that just like a ladder. It's like more like an asks or things to select from. That's kind of what it. Over here, Matsuda is like the type of guy who, yeah, I'm just gonna wait. I'll see what gonna. But there's also something interesting about this sort of mode of leadership. Because over here in this story, this is also coming from the Yahoo Japan story. I believe it's the same because these part again from VGC. Square Enix president says its Japanese studios shouldn't try to imitate Western developers. Says the world recognizes and appreciates Japanese games. I 100% agree with this. Most people do, I would imagine. Most of their fans do. And I don't want to see anyone imitating anyone in the sense that games trying to make Western games and Western games trying to make Japanese style games. It gets weird. Of course, there's plenty of good exceptions like Ghost of Tsushima, and the creator of Yakuza was like, they out Japanned us. They're at Sucker Punch. I get that. I totally get that. At the same time, I would want developers, especially really skilled developers, know their craft so well, got it down to a T, to just keep on trying to reformulate what they've been trying to do. Like what I'm saying is, I want to see more Final Fantasies from the Final Fantasy teams, but I want them to change it up every now and then, which they already do. I don't want to see the Final Fantasy teams work on different games like Forspoken, which is kind of weird because they're banking a lot on this because it looks great. It's made by the Final Fantasy 15 teams, and it's a Western style, or at least Western looking game coming from a Japanese studio. So I don't know what Matsuda is talking about when he says stuff like that. I mean, when I think of what people want from Square Enix, they want more of this Tactics Ogre coming back. They want more of this, more Final Fantasy, a new one. They want more of this, I guess. They want more of this, more different new RPGs. And this completely new RPG. I'm not saying for Square Enix just stick to RPGs, but it's what they're best at. Just is. That's how it's been. And I'm sure CEO and president understands that. So, lead to? Well, going back to the second part of that, same news story from Yahoo Japan. Matsuda's quote here, it tells us he does have the finger on the pulse, that he's aware what the industry is like now. So, let me read. The game market is now global. The domestic market used to be large, but now it is second only to China and the United States. If it is not recognized globally, it will not be a business. Interestingly, however, Japanese cannot imitate Western games. The pictures of monsters and the effects of video and audio will be somewhat Japanese. Players all over the world know that this is a goodness of Japanese games. The overseas market is important, but it is not enough to develop it for overseas markets. In the future, I would like to take on the challenge of providing, quote, autonomous game content. To date, many of the games we have provided content as finished products, and players have played that content. And that's where he kind of stumps me. I don't understand what he means. I don't understand what he means. game content. I'm just saying what I think, basically. Turning players into users, turning players into creators, doing what I think Dreams. You guys know that PlayStation exclusive Dreams from Little Big Planet devs out Media Molecule. Basically, players slash users making content of their own for other players to play. I think that's what he means. I'm not sure, actually. Ultimately, this leaves us with a bit of confusion. You're not doing this with any of the games that we're seeing right now. I mean, you as in Square-Enix. They're not doing this with Babylon's Fall, as far as I know. Game's dying. They know that from what they said about it, but Square-Enix doesn't feel too bad. Go into that different video, mainly over Platinum. But I don't see that with Final Fantasy XIV. I don't see that with... I'm seeing the opposite with Forspoken, like I mentioned earlier. I don't see that. I haven't seen anything of Remake Part 2 or anything more of Final Fantasy 16. God, I hope they don't do any of that kind of BS with Final Fantasy. But I don't know what they mean by this autonomous game content. I don't know why they would want NFTs into any of their games, since they know that it's just, ugh, why? I know that their stock price went up for that after that announcement. That was kind of confusing, but I'm guessing it's just because shareholders like seeing companies follow trends. That's a much bigger topic. But what I pulled up here is just the search results on EGC. Just any, you could do this with any news site, I'm sure. But what I wanted to point out was that there is a polarizing Square Enix that I'll tell you over here. That's a good message. But as we looked into the story, he means something else. Not just saying that Japanese studios shouldn't try to imitate Western games. And then, so what we have here, how about this? Good Square Enix, bad Square Enix. How about that? Good Square Enix, bad Square Enix. Why Square Enix? Throwing that one. Good Square Enix, I guess? And good Square Enix. Fan feedback. Babylon's Fall, as you may have read recently, seen videos of. Less than 10 players, as of the latest stories. Not much more to say about that. Good Square Enix. Good Square Enix. Great Square Enix. Bad Square Enix. What was your expectation for Guardians of the Galaxy? Good Square Enix. Bad Square Enix. Bad Square Enix. Bad Square Enix. The PC port for this, like, if you just look at any search results for Final Fantasy VII Remake's PC port, they probably updated now, but this is how they came out. Digital Foundry went nuts over they just eviscerated. It's essentially the remake port, the PC port wasn't very well received. Hopefully they update it if they haven't already. This was a while back, but going back, Square Enix, bad Square Enix, and you have bad Square Enix. Obviously, why did this happen? Why did Crystal Dynamics make a games as a service game, Marvel's Avengers? Good Square Enix, really good Square Enix. I'm glad that Star Ocean is coming back. I haven't played a little bit of Star Ocean, but I always thought of it as a series that like should have had another shot after Integrity and Faithlessness, the last one, and I heard it was just really poorly. Then I haven't heard anything bad about like the one before it, the last Square Enix and Stranger of Paradise. That's just by Square Enix, but you get the idea. They're pretty kind of inconsistent, and a lot of the inconsistency comes from games like this. I heard Guardians of the Galaxy was great, but more so games like this, and they want to do more of that. And then having, I don't know what their expectations are for a game like this. Neo, The World Ends With You. If I remember correctly, this was a Nintendo DS or 3DS, I'm not sure. And then it became a Switch exclusive? Again, not so sure. Oh yeah, and to go a little deeper on the Guardians of the Galaxy stuff, hear from Eurogamer. This was another issue they had. They continually have, that Square Enix has some weird expectations for certain games. I'm guessing really high expectations, specifically on sales issues. And it's like, wait a minute, this isn't a game won BAFTA awards, won DICE awards. And a lot of people said a lot of great things about Guardians of the Galaxy. And then when it came to sales, we don't know the numbers yet, but one of the developers said, according to Eurogame article, when they said, but first the issue of those sales, on which the team said it had no regrets. Not necessarily saying the sales were great, the sales were bad. Sales were not regrettable, basically. That's what they said. Regarding the sales for a good game, a supposedly good game, a solidly good game. I just don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. Take care.